طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all in this new session in the series Curing the Soul, and in the sub-series The Fiqh of Sins. And this is the book written by Imam Ibnul Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, addressing one of two problems a believer would face in their journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One being ash-shubuhat, doubts and confusions and weakness of iman, lack of knowledge, lack of certainty, vagueness of knowledge. All these are shubuhat. That's one problem. If you have shubuhat, you won't be able to progress to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more clear you are, the more knowledgeable you are, the more alert you are, you will be more likely to be moving in speed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second problem that one has is the control of shahawat, to protect oneself from evil temptations. This book addresses this second problem, the evil temptations. However, you noticed that one will not fall in shahawat, evil temptations, unless they have shubuhat, unless they have doubts, confusions, lack of certainty, lack of clarity. Otherwise, evil things are never desirable to anybody who is fully knowledgeable. To somebody who's fully certain, they will never find temptations in anything that is evil or displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they will see through it. They will see that this evil thing is going to bring them evil consequences at a later time. So whoever struggles with whoever struggles with shahawat, evil desires and evil temptations, the underpinning causes for that are shubuhat, doubts and confusions. So before we tackle any shahawat that we might be struggling with, any desires, any temptations that we might be struggling with, we need to understand that there must be some shubuhat that also needs to be eliminated and dealt with, right? So in this part of the book, Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, in his answer to this person who says that he was controlled, his heart was fully controlled by evil temptations, shahawat, and he's asking for guidance. In this part of the book, Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala is speaking about the nature of sins, because the more you understand the nature of sins, how do they come about, what damage they cause, how you can eliminate them from the roots of them, the more likely you will be to avoid them, right? So that's why he's speaking about the nature of sins, and that's why we call this sub-series the fiqh of sins, developing deep understanding of sins and how they come about. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, in helping this person whose heart is overtaken by temptations and love and infatuation for a person that he was in love with, Imam Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala spoke about the evil consequences of zina. We spoke about that in previous classes. And we said that even though this book is speaking about zina, but we can benefit from the same knowledge in other areas of life. Anyone can help us with this? Anyone can remind us what other areas of life we can benefit from in learning what Ibn al-Qayyim gave as advice to a person who's struggling with zina, the temptation of zina, the shahwat of zina? In what other ways?
Not to look. Not to look.
Yeah, we will get to that, inshallah. But in general, the guidance that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, one might say, alhamdulillah, I am not in that problem, I'm not struggling with that. So why are we reading the book? What is the benefit in that? Right?
It applies to every part of our life.
Yeah, it applies to every type of emotion that you might be struggling with. Because zina comes from lust, and lust is the overtaking emotion that makes a person strongly desires something, even though it is in a sexual sense. But anything that you if one is able to control the lust, which is one of the strongest emotions, then by the same principles you can control other emotions like fear, like jealousy, like fear, like anger, like anxiety, like regret, severe regret that you cannot get over. So we are studying this series from a number of perspectives, and it can be relevant to us in so many different ways, right? So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, because he addresses this issue, the first thing that he spoke about is the importance of lowering the gaze. The importance of lowering the gaze. And we tackled that in the previous session. Lowering the gaze means that you stop consuming the substance that will cause the flames of that emotion. In particular, the substance that will cause the flames of desire and lust. But likewise, if you struggle with thoughts relating to sadness, right? If you don't want this emotion to take over you, you need to stop getting exposure to anything that will trigger those thoughts back in you. You need to stop that. So you can see things either with your eyes, but you can also see things with the eyes of your mind by contemplating on previous life situations, hardships, traumatic events in your life. Right? This will be the triggers of that emotion. So if you want to be free from that negative emotion, you need to stop getting exposed to the causes of it, whatever it may be. All right? So that is al-basar. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, when evil comes to one's deen, our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the word deen means your righteous actions. Your righteous actions can be protected if you can protect 4 things, he said. Number one, he says, your eyes, what you look at. Number 2, your thoughts, what you think about. Number 3, your utterance, the spoken words. And number 4, your actions, what you do, al-khatawat. He says, al-lahadhat, the plural of lahda, which means the gaze, one instant of a glance, al-lahda. Al-khatarat, the plural of khatara, which means the thought. Al-lafadhat, which means the plural of lafda, the utterance, one word you speak, you need to catch that. And then he says, al-khatawat, steps, footsteps, meaning actions. You need to watch every step you take, because every step is going to get you closer to either righteousness or evil. But we'll tackle these. So he wrote a chapter for each one of those. As for al-lahadat, so before we get there, he says, فَيَنْبَغِي لِلْعَبْدِ, it is incumbent for every servant who is genuinely seeking salvation of the hereafter and genuinely seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the gatekeeper for his nafs. The gatekeeper for these 4 areas. Making sure you stand on those gates and you don't allow anything to pass through except that which you know is beneficial to you. If you let loose of those gates, evil will come in. And then actions will follow. He says, رحمه الله تعالى, أكثر ما تدخل المعاصي على العبد من هذه الأبواب الأربعة. The most corruption that comes in the actions of any servant and the deen of any servant of Allah comes from these 4 areas. فنذكر في كل باب منها فصلا يليق به. He said we will write few words in each one of those 4 areas. That suffices. So we spoke about the first chapter or the first section of the book where he spoke about the evil of looks, the eyes, and the importance of guarding the eyes. This is in the recording of the previous class if you didn't attend it. Now moving on from that, he says now the following chapter is on al-khatarat. Al-khatarat, the plural of khatra. the thoughts, your thoughts. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, الخطرات فشأنها أصعب. As for the thoughts of the mind, they are even more dangerous than gazes, than when you look. More dangerous. Why? Because every good begins with a thought. And every evil also begins with a thought. I mean, good action and evil action. Every good action begins with a thought, and every bad action also begins with a thought. And from thoughts also, what begets thoughts beget willpowers, or will, or determination, or energy, al-himma, to be driven to any particular action. That begins with what? With the thought. So if you manage the thought, you can manage where you're going. If you don't manage the thoughts, then you will lose your path. And that's why, subhanAllah, shaitan, even though he cannot avert us from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he cannot take us physically away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that he focuses on what? He focuses in poisoning our thoughts. And he succeeds. He succeeds a lot. On the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the jinn, Ya ma'shar al-jinni qad istakthartum min al-ins. O people, O folks from jinn kind, you have taken a lot with you to the fire of hell. And this is due to what? Due to only whispers. And whispers are a form of thought. So if you know the danger of whispers, the danger of thoughts, you really need to put a lot of thoughts in your thoughts. I mentioned to you in the previous class, there's a line that goes, Yani, you are what you think you. You as a person, you are a mass of thoughts. You are a mass of thoughts and a mass of emotions. These emotions, they will not be there had it not been for the thoughts. So you are thoughts that develop into emotions, and you are literally a mass of emotions. Your actions, your reactions, your interaction with the world around you, it all stems from your emotions. Right? And your emotions come from your thoughts. So they said that your reality, the life that you live, the future that you will live, whatever you are today and whatever you will be in the future, is the product of your thoughts. So a Muslim, an intelligent person, later on a Muslim, will be very, very keen to guard their thoughts. Right? And they need to have a philosophy on how to go about guarding the thoughts. Alhamdulillah, Ibn Qayyim wrote a chapter for us in this beneficial book. He says, فَمَنْ رَاعَ خَطَرَاتِهِ مَلَكَ زِمَامَ نَفْسِهِ وَقَهَرَ هَوَاهُ. One of 4 enemies that you have to deal with is your nafs and your hawa. Your nafs. Your nafs is basically when it's inclined towards evil temptations, when it's inclined towards laziness and just relaxing and not doing what it had to do, when the nafs is inclined towards transgressing the rights of others and not giving people what you owe them. This is what the nafs does. And your hawa as well, the mindset that develops into just following what the nafs wants. These are 2 enemies. Ibn al-Qayyim says they are very strong enemies. And you can conquer the wrestling that you have with them, the battle that you have with them, if you manage to conquer the thoughts. There are thoughts that feed into your nafs, and there are thoughts that empowers your hawa. If you deny your nafs and your hawa those thoughts, then you will have no problems. You don't have much to deal with. So he says, مَنْ رَاعَ خَطَرَاتِهِ مَلَكَ زِمَامَ نَفْسِهِ. You will be the one in charge, not your nafs. And you will be also able to overpower your hawa. وَمَنْ غَلَبَتْهُ خَطَرَاتُهُ فَهَوَاهُ وَنَفْسُهُ لَهُ أَغْلَبُ. And whoever is overpowered with his thoughts, then his nafs will rule him, and his hawa also will control him. You will be controlled by your hawa. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَمَنْ اسْتَهَانَ بِالْخَطَرَاتِ قَادَتْهُ قَهْرًا إِلَى الْهَلَكَاتِ. Thoughts, a lot of people who don't think them through, they don't give them the attention they deserve, they need to realize that negligence of thoughts will take you into destruction. You need to begin realizing the danger of thoughts. The potential of thoughts, in the one hand, where good thoughts can take you, but also the danger of thoughts if you don't control them. Ibnul Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, now having given us this introduction about the importance of thoughts, he speaks about one evil phenomenon that some people may experience. Those people who lose sight of the importance of controlling the thoughts, managing the thoughts, governing the thoughts, whereby a person undermines the power of thoughts, and therefore they don't look after them. You can have a good thought in your mind, a thought that can take you somewhere, that can be developed further. But people get into the habit of allowing thoughts to come in their minds. They will mull over them for a little bit, they will think about them for a little bit, but no action. They will not do any action with it. It will not transform into a reality. So you have something really, really powerful in your mind that can turn things into realities, right? But you will waste that. You will waste that. He says this is a very dangerous phenomenon, a very dangerous mindset. If you get into the habit of thinking thoughts but never doing anything about them, that's very dangerous, because you would have lost the benefit of thoughts altogether. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَلَا تَزَالُ الْخَطَرَاتُ تَتَرَدَّدُ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ حَتَّى تَصِيرَ مُنًا بَاطِلَةً. Thoughts, will keep on repeating themselves. They will keep occurring to you. I need to do this. I need to do that. This is what I should be doing. This is something I should not be doing. I have a plan for this. This is the right thing to do. For example, we learn a lot of things in these classes, right? But one of the most dangerous things is for you to make a realization, but never act upon it. What will happen? You will get accustomed to having thoughts and never doing anything about them. Right? And by doing so, you have lost all the fuel, all the energy that you could potentially use to change your life. You've become a person that no matter how powerful thoughts come to your mind, no matter how many good stuff you come across, you are going to still be the same person, never changing. So he says this is really, really dangerous. One has to be mindful of that. And then he quoted, subhanAllah, a verse from Surah An-Nur, which has an analogy to the people of kufr, the disbelievers who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't believe in the akhirah, who happen to have some righteous deeds in their lives. Allah gave an example for them. This is chapter An-Nur 25, chapter 25, verse 39. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيعَةٍ. The disbelievers, again, is chapter 25, verse 39. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who disbelieved, what happens to their righteous deeds? He says, their righteous deeds has this example. كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيعَةٍ, like a mirage that one sees when they travel in the desert, in an empty, long field, open field. In the long distance, where there is no food, no drink, this person in the desert, so desperately for a sip of water, a person in this state of desperation, they see something in the distance, they think this is something that will benefit them. The mirage. They think this is like a lake or some form of water. كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيعَةٍ يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً. A person who is killed with thirst, الظَّمْآن, who is excessively thirsty. يَحْسَبُهُ مَاءً. He will think that this is water. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَهُ لَمْ يَجِدْهُ شَيْئًا. Until he keeps on marching towards it. And when he gets to that place, that spot where he saw the Miraj, he will find that there was nothing there. Okay? So this is their a'mal, their righteous deed they did. The kuffar, some of the disbelievers who don't believe in Allah, don't believe in the hereafter, they do certain things, but not for Allah, not for the hereafter. So what happens to that? It will not benefit them in the akhirah. In the time when they are most desperate for that. Allah says here, حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَهُ لَمْ يَجِدْهُ شَيْئًا. When this traveler, overly thirsty traveler, arrives at the spot, he will find nothing there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said, وَوَجَدَ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ. And he will find Allah there. He will find Allah there, i.e., to account him for the state that he's in. فَوَفَّاهُ حِسَابًا. And he will give him all his accounting in that spot. Because the analogy says, if you imagine this traveler desperately running towards this destination, and then when they get there, they will find nothing. But then that's the worst. No gain and no losses. But Allah says, no, this person will have accountability waiting for them. Ibnul Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he wrote this ayah to show you that the thoughts that sometimes you might be mulling over, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Eventually, you will begin to believe that the thought themselves will bring you benefit. You'll begin to think just the mere thoughts in themselves will bring you benefit, when in reality, they will not bring you benefit unless you develop them further and they come into action. Okay? So he's saying, if you don't look after your thoughts, you will begin to think just having the thought in itself is a development, is a progress. When the real progress is acting upon the thought, letting the thought change your reality. Okay? And that's why, subhanAllah, I was speaking to the brothers in the brothers class, and I said one danger that we may have in our tazkiyah journey, our spiritual development, is when you get to this point where you talk a lot about tazkiyah issues, about spiritual development matters, and you have ideas here and there, and you think about them, you reflect on them, but this is where you stop. You just think, you just consume knowledge, but you never act upon it. This state of affair is very dangerous, extremely dangerous, because it will make you the kind of person that is used to just thinking and never acting. Ibnul Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, quoting this verse, he says, أَخَصُّ النَّاسِ هِمَّةً وَأَوْضَعُهُمْ نَفْسًا. The most disgraceful of people and the lowest in aspiration are the people who content themselves with empty thoughts. He says, أَخَصُّ النَّاسِ هِمَّةً. The people who have the least aspirations, goals, objectives to achieve. The people who have the least objectives, the least aspirations, وَأَوْضَعُهُمْ نَفْسًا. And the most disgraceful of souls. Right? Because when you have high aspirations, you become lofty, you become aspirational, and you become honorable. But then the people who have these empty thoughts that don't end up becoming anything at all, that don't develop into actions, they will end up becoming one of the lowest of people, the least honorable people, the least in honor and the most in disgrace. How did that happen? Because you become used to this, and you believe that you should only aim for low goals. You get used to that. He says, من رضي من الحقائق بالأماني الكاذبة. Those who content themselves with empty thoughts, lying ambitions, empty ambitions, and they miss out on al-haqa'iq. Al-haqa'iq mean the realities that those thoughts could have brought about. Is this idea clear, guys? Is it clear? Yeah? This is really powerful. This is a life-changing thought, and a lot of us are stuck somewhere in their lives because of lack of understanding of this one single idea. That thoughts are only beneficial if you manage to transform them into actions. Point number one. Point number two, if you become habitually the kind of person that have thoughts but never act upon it, this will become a stuck mindset with you. It will become a mindset that will be very difficult to change. So he said, this person أخص الناس همة وأوضعهم نفسا من رضي من الحقائق بالأماني الكاذبة واستحلاها واستجلبها لنفسه وتحلى بها. The kind of people who are just full of thoughts, full of ideas. They talk and they find sweetness even in talking about ambitious big things. But this is how far they go. Never actually do anything at all. He says, رحمه الله تعالى, وهي لعمر الله رؤوس أموال المفاليس. The bankrupt people, their capital is this. This is how people end up being bankrupt in the hereafter. ومتاجر البطالين, and the people who are jobless, people who are useless, this is their merchandise. All they have is kalam, speech. Okay? وهي قوت النفس الفارغة التي قد تقنع من الوصال بزورة الخيال. He says, and this is the feeding, the food that an empty soul would eat, would consume. You know, an empty soul, a soul that has no real goals, it will find enough nourishment for it in just talking about success, talking about development, talking about changing, talking about being better. There's a lowly type of nafs that will be content with this. That is sufficient. So Ibn Qayyim رحمه الله تعالى, he says, وهي أضر شيء على الإنسان. Nothing can be more harmful to you than developing this mindset. That's why, my brothers and my sisters, you need to make sure you don't allow this to become a mindset for you. Right? Whatever you do, whatever you think, make sure you think in constructive ways, and make sure that you bring your thought into realities. Otherwise, you are stuck. He says, وَيَتَوَلَّدُ مِنْهَا الْعَجْزُ وَالْكَسَلُ. Two bad qualities that we always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from. Al-ajz and al-kasal. Al-ajz is when you believe that you are incapable of doing things. Al-ajz. Feeling that you are incapable. Believing that you can't do things. Al-kasal is when you believe that you can do it, but you can't be bothered at the moment. What is al-ajz? Al-ajz is what, huh? Believing that you can't do it. You're too weak. You're too incompetent. You're just unable to do it, whatever it may be. This is called ajz, believing that you are incapable. And what's al-kasal? Al-kasal, feeling that you can do it, but not now. Now you can't be able to do it now. So feeling that you can do something, whatever it may be, but you can't be bothered to do it right now. This is called al-kasal. And every day in the morning, we should be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from what? From al-ajz wal-kasal. Okay? Because they are very destructive. If they stuck with you as a mindset, you will not go anywhere. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, احرص على ما ينفعك. Focus your mind into that which is beneficial to you. احرص على ما ينفعك. Develop keenness in only doing that which is beneficial to you. Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, when a person contemplates an idea, something, they will either do something beneficial to them or harmful to them, or something that is idle, not particularly beneficial, not particularly harmful. One of three areas. He says this hadith is telling us, don't do that which is harmful, and don't do that which is idle, and focus on doing something beneficial. Meaning something that we will end up acting upon. Ihris, develop this keenness to act upon things. So if you don't act upon your thoughts, if you don't govern your thoughts, you will develop this mindset. You will either be in a state of ajz or in a state of kasal. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَتُوَلِّدُ التَّفْرِيطَ وَالْحَسْرَةَ وَالنَّدَمِ. what it will bring about as well, التفريط means negligence. Negligence and abandonment of opportunities. Life will give you opportunities. Right? But when you are lazy, you will let one opportunity pass, and another one pass, a third one pass, and your life will be a series of missed opportunities. تفريط. You let go of chances in life. Right? And then that brings about sadness and regret in the future. التفريط والحسرة والندم. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-mutamanni, the person who is content with umniya. Umniya. You know what umniya is? Claiming that you are good enough and good things will just come to you without action. Right? In Surah Al-Baqarah, we find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that the people of the book, right, they said, we are the best. No one will enter Jannah except Jews. The Jews said. And the Christians, they said, no one is going to enter Jannah except Christians. And some Muslims debated with them in Medina and said, the ones who will enter Jannah are actually Muslims. Allah says, لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. It is not about this amani, claims, claims that are not followed with actions. لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Whoever does righteous deeds, they will be rewarded for it. And whoever does evil, they will also be punished for it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, be careful, don't be in this state of amani, umniya. Umniya are dreams, right? Good dreams, but that have no realities to them. Right? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَالْمُتَمَنِّي لَمَّا فَاتَتْهُ مُبَاشَرَةُ الْحَقِيقَةِ بِجِسْمِهِ نَحَتَ صُورَتَهَا فِي قَلْبِهِ. This person who is in a state of tamanni, wishful thinking, when he or she realizes that this is a reality that they cannot bring about, this is like a dream which they cannot bring into reality, they contented themselves of embracing the thought itself as if it was the dream itself. They like to talk about it. They like to discuss it. They like to write about it. They like, but that's where they stop. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَالسُّكُونُ إِلَى ذَلِكَ وَاسْتِجْلَابُهُ يَدُلُّ عَلَى خَسَارَةِ النَّفْسِ وَضَعَتَهَا. For one to find themselves in this state and content in that position, this is an indication that you are heading towards bankruptcy. You are heading towards losses. And bit by bit as well, what will happen to you? You will lose your self-respect. وَضَاعَةُ النَّفْسِ. وَضَاعَةُ النَّفْسِ means you will begin to think extremely lowly of yourself. Why? Because with every thought that comes to mind and you don't end up acting upon it, that affects your image, how you think of yourself. What they call in psychology today, your self-image. They say that every one of us, we have an image in our heads about ourselves. So in every instant in which you think of something and then you end up bringing it into an action, that improves your self-image. And then you respect yourself better. And in every instant in which you think of something but never do it, this will distort or make your self-image look uglier. Such that every time you think about a mission, you think about a goal, you think about this image you have in your head of yourself. And then you will decide, no, this person, the image you have of you, you say this person is incapable of doing this. And that's when the person, instead of aiming at something powerful, something significant, they end up thinking about lowly things because they think this is all I can attain in life. And self-image and self-respect, subhanAllah, is really powerful and impactful in terms of one's contentment and one's happiness. So what comes also with low self-esteem, low self-respect is a lot of sadness and depression. You really feel sad. So don't undermine this topic of ideas and thoughts and the effect of neglecting them. It's really destructive. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, on the other hand, شرف النفس, the honor of the nafs. the glory of the nafs, how highly you think of your nafs. شرف النفس وزكاؤها, the elevation of it, وطهارتها وعلوها, and the purity of it and the exaltation of it, only comes about بأن ينفي عنها كل خطرة لا حقيقة لها. This only comes about by making sure that you filter through your thoughts and you disallow any thought that isn't going to come into reality. And to make sure that if you have any thought, you filter them and you organize them and you tackle them by order, and you make sure that you bring about the most important of them. ولا يرضى أن يخطرها بباله ويأنف لنفسه منها. You will disallow any empty thoughts from settling in your head. Meaning, never be in a position where you are thinking about something that has no action related to it. You know, sometimes we keep on dwelling about this and that and this and that, but these thoughts are not actionable. Right? If you really care about yourself, disallow yourself from thinking like this at all. And imagine if this is something that is said about empty thoughts. This is how destructive what empty thoughts are. Just thoughts that are not actionable. Imagine what evil thoughts will do. Imagine what evil thoughts will, when you actually sit down and think about something negative. What we've been talking about here, when one thinks about something positive, but never acts upon it. So imagine how much worse will it be if somebody allows their engine, the engine of their minds, to keep on chewing on negative things. Okay? This will be much more destructive than empty thought. For a person, for example, a person may be thinking here, what can I do about this? What can I do about this? Okay? Where this is a reality that you cannot change. What can you change about this? Nothing. So thinking about this, like today, subhanAllah, I had one sister. She has problems with her in-laws and going through divorce, and it's her family who are the family of her in-laws basically have caused problems between her and her husband. So she's in the process of separation now. Now she's sitting down to think about the sad state of affairs whereby she can never part from her in-laws ever again. Why? Because she's pregnant. She's pregnant, and this child that she has will always tie her back to the in-laws, those people. Now I said, is this a reality that you can change? This is something you cannot change. What's the point of thinking about it? You know, so thinking about something that you cannot change is from shaitan. And you need to get into the habit. You only think about something about which you can do something. If there's nothing that can be done about it, stop thinking about it. Khalas. You only think about what's actionable. And that's why, following this paragraph, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, so now, having established this, the danger and the importance of governing and managing thoughts, he says, after that, if you don't have empty thoughts, you have meaningful thoughts, actionable thoughts, you need to understand that all thoughts will boil down to 4 areas. All beneficial thoughts boil down to 4 areas. So write them down to make sure that whatever you think about is within those 4 areas. Otherwise, they are empty thoughts from shaitan. What are they? He says, الخطرات بعد أقسام تدور على 4 أصول. Every kind of thoughts, once they are meaningful, actionable thoughts, they will revolve around 4 principles. It will fall into one of 4 categories. What are they? Number 1, خطرات يستجلب بها العبد منافع دنيا. Thoughts, beneficial thoughts, with which you bring dunya-related benefits. Thoughts with which you bring about, or you gain dunya-related benefits. That's good. It's not something that you should avoid. And then he says, وَخَطَرَاتٌ يَسْتَدْفِعُ بِهَا مَضَارَ الدُّنْيا. Thoughts with which you fend off or protect yourself from harmful things relating to this dunya. thoughts with which you can protect yourself from bad things relating to this dunya. Number 3, he says, خطرات يستجلب بها مصالح الآخرة. Thoughts, actionable thoughts, with which you bring about benefits relating to al-akhirah. Number 4, thoughts with which you protect yourself from harms relating to al-akhirah. You live in this dunya, and soon you will pass on from this dunya to al-akhirah. So your thoughts should be revolving these two lives. The life of this dunya, bringing the gains that you can possibly bring into this dunya, protecting yourself from the evil that could afflict you from this dunya, and also relating to the akhirah, bringing benefits, having actionable thoughts with which you bring benefits of the akhirah, and actionable thoughts with which you protect yourself from the harms of al-akhirah. Right? He says, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, you should make sure that you limit your thoughts to these 4 categories. You refuse to think about anything that isn't part of these categories. Yes.
When you say dunya-related benefits, like as the first one,
number 1, like applying for a job, right? Like getting married, like doing your duties, whatever they may be. How do I look after my children? How do I look after my family? How do I look after my health? How do I avoid sicknesses? How do I avoid bad situations with the neighbors, bad situations with the government? These are dunya related. You either think about something, an idea, an actionable idea through which you can bring a gain, or through which you can protect yourself from a possible harm. Right? And the same thing with the akhirah. So he says, فَلْيَحْصِرِ الْعَبْدُ خَطَرَاتِهِ وَأَفْكَارَهُ وَهُمُومَهُ فِي هَذِهِ الْأَقْسَامِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ. All your thoughts, all your reflection, all your pondering should be limited to these 4 areas. Anything beyond that is from shaitan. Anything beyond that is wasting of your mental capacity, is wasting of this powerful engine you have in your mind. The power of your thoughts is a waste of it. Right? And subhanallah, when you actually think about something, you actually feel as if there is actually an engine within you working. And when you look at subhanallah, the science of dietitians and dietary, they realize that the one organ of the body that consumes the most calories is your brain. When you're thinking, when you think, it is really, and that's why part of the functions of your brain is to determine what is worthy of thinking about and what is not worthy of thinking about. Right? What is time consuming, what is energy consuming, and what is not. Right? Ibnul Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, you have to refuse to get into the habit of thinking about something that is outside of those 4 areas. He says, فَإِذَا انْحَصَرَتْ لَهُ فِيهَا فَمَا أَمْكَنَ اجْتِمَاعُهُ مِنْهَا لَمْ يَتْرُكُهُ لِغَيْرِهِ. If you are able to limit your thoughts and make sure that you bring all these benefits and avoid all these harms, then if you can combine them all, bring them all. Don't let go of any of these 4 things. Does that make sense? If you have ideas, you're reflecting about things relating to the benefits of dunya or the benefits of the akhirah, the harms of dunya or the harms of akhirah, if they are all actionable, you don't have to compromise any one of them, then aim for all of them. Aim for all of them. He says, وَإِذَا تَزَاحَمَتْ عَلَيْهِ الْخَطَرَاتِ لِتَزَاحُمْ مُتَعَلِّقَاتِهَا قَدَّمَ الْأَهَمَّ فَالْأَهَمَّ. If you find that you have thoughts that are contradictory of one another, you cannot execute this except at the expense of the other. In that case, you need to be mindful about the priorities. Sometimes you find yourself in situations where you can only do one thing. You have to choose this or the other. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he says, قَدَّمَ الْأَهَمَّ فَالْأَهَمَّ. And also, يُقَدِّمْ مَا يَخْشَى فَوَاتَهُ. So one area is to look into the most important things. What is higher in your priority list? Also, another consideration you need to look into, you need to look into what is missable. What is missable? What is one thing that you can miss out on? And what are the things that if you leave them for now, you will have a following opportunity to do them at a later time. So there are ideas and actions that are time sensitive. You either do it now or it's gone. The opportunity is gone. Are you able to recognize what is time sensitive and what is not time sensitive? And therefore, those that are not time sensitive, you postpone them in favor for those activities or those projects that are time sensitive. He says also there are two other categories. He says أحدهما مهم لا يفوت. There is something that is important, you can never miss out on. You will never miss out on. If you leave opportunity right now of this important thing, you will not miss out on it. Second category is غير مهم ولكنه يفوت. Something that is not important, but you will miss out on it if you let go of this opportunity. So in your mind, you're thinking about two things. One of them is important, but not time sensitive. And the other one is less important, but time sensitive. Now, what do you do? Look, Ibn Qayyim is trying to show you that this is something that if you put your mind into this, there's a lot to think about. A lot to think about. He says in each of these two, there's something that will want you to, that will call for you to action it. The important thing, it's important. Its importance. And with regards to the urgent matter that is missable, its urgency calls you to act upon it. Right? He says, also, you may be in a situation whereby you have two important things, both of them are important, and you can only do one by missing the other. There's no chance you can postpone one. You have to choose between the two. Right? He says this is the situation where aql will be needed and Islamic knowledge will be needed. Because if you have been feeding your aql with Islamic knowledge, you will be able to recognize the subtle differences between two actionable ideas and then decide that this one is more important than that. This is more pressing than this. When I have to choose between one or the other and miss out on one in favor for the other, I should know which one to choose. This only happens if you have been feeding your aql. In other words, he's saying that there are many people who are wasting their time, wasting their energy, wasting their thoughts because they can't tell what is important and what is not important, what is time sensitive and what is not time sensitive. So they end up doing non-important things or less important things and missing out on extremely critical things. And they end up doing something that is not urgent and they miss out on something that is urgent. Due to what? Due to the lack of wisdom, lack of knowledge, lack of aql, intelligence. He says, وَمِنْ هَا هُنَا ارْتَفَعَ مَنْ ارْتَفَعَ وَأَنْجَحَ مَنْ أَنْجَحَ وَخَابَ مَنْ خَابَ. From this angle, from this perspective, this is why we see the variation between people. There are those who manage to elevate themselves one step after another, one step after another. They manage to keep moving up, you know. And there are those who are they are mediocre in their performances. What's the difference? Those successful ones, they were able to see what is urgent and what's not urgent, what is important compared to one that is less important. He says, فَأَكْثَرُ Ibn Qayyim رحمه الله, he says, فَأَكْثَرُ مَنْ تَرَى ممن يعظم أو يعظم عقله ومعرفته يؤثر غير المهم الذي لا يفوت على المهم الذي يفوت. Most people who you'll think that they are intelligent people, you'll think that they are intelligent, you'll find them given precedence, given higher level of importance to something that is not important and not urgent over something that is important and urgent. A lot of people are like this. I mean, take for example, non-Muslims. You come across people who are brain-wise, they're quite intelligent, but you find them, subhanallah, have turned their back to al-akhirah altogether, and they are focusing all their energy to making money, to improve their business, to excel in their income, and so on and so forth. So what they do, they neglected something that is urgent and more important in favor of something that is low and not important. They do the same thing with regards to even Muslims can fall for this mistake, whereby they give preference to their career, for example, their career, their money, their business, right, at the expense of family, children, spouses, right? That happens. When in reality, when you ask them, why do you do what you do? Why do you work the way you do? Why do you run your business? What do you hope for? They will tell you, I do this for my kids. I do this for my wife. I do this for my family. But in the process, they have lost that which is more important in favor of something that is less important, right? Because work, money, etc., is the means, and family and your deen and your spirit, your soul, that's the goal. How could you sacrifice that which is most important, that which is the goal, only to gain that which is the means? That's foolishness. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala says, those who are successful have only succeeded because of that ability to tell what is worthy of given higher level of priorities versus what's not. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَلَا تَجِدُ أَحَدًا يَسْلَمُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ وَلَكِنْ مُسْتَقِلٌ وَمُسْتَكْثِرٌ. You will not find anybody except that there will be times where they fall for this mistake. Most people, they will fall for this mistakes, but there are those who fall for this mistake every now and then, rarely. And there are those who do it all the time. The whole life they live is based on missing out on important things and focusing on less important things. فمستقل ومستكثر. What is the rule when it comes to this? He says رحمه الله تعالى والتحكيم في هذا الباب للقاعدة الكبرى التي عليها مدار الشرع والقدر. What is the rule with which you can make that kind of decision? He says, for this grand, very important principle in Islam, around which the whole deen revolves. What is this rule? He says, إيثار أكبر المصلحتين وأعلاهما. Always focus on that which is greater in benefit. وإن فاتت المصلحة التي هي دونها. You focus on the greater of the two goods, even if you have to miss out on the lesser of the two goods. والدخول في أدنى المفسدتين لدفع ما هو أكبر منها. If you have to fall into one of the two undesirable situations, then get or allow the less evil one so that you can avoid the greater of the evil ones. The greater one, the one with greater evil. That is the principle in general. But all this principle, you can only benefit from it if you have the insight, the understanding as what is greater than which and what is more harmful than which. Does that make sense? So in short, going back to thoughts, he says خطرات العاقل وفكره لا يجاوز ذلك. A sane person, an intelligent person, his or her thoughts will never depart from this way of thinking. You're always thinking about benefits, gains, which of the two benefits is greater, harms, which of the two harmful things are more evil, how do I avoid the greater of the two evils, how do I secure the greater of the two goods, and so on and so forth. The thoughts of a sane person always thinking like this. Okay? And when you think like this, automatically you will be in a good mental state, because you will see that you are progressing. Capture this, my brothers and sisters. Your mental state, your contentment. If you find yourself thinking about fruitful things, even merely thinking about them will make you feel good about yourself. A lot of the times we feel so miserable and so down because when we examine our thoughts, we can see we're not going anywhere with our thoughts. Our thoughts are just like a tornado, just 3 items, 4 items, making like a storm in our minds, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, not constructive. So if you manage to control your thoughts, think in an organized fashion, that in itself will give you a lot of happiness and a lot of inner peace within you. Right? And I always share with you this tip. Always, if you find yourself unable to organize your thoughts in your mind, use a pen and paper. Write and rewrite, write and rewrite. Use colors if you have to, use highlighters if you have to, type them up, put them in tables, put them in illustrations and diagrams, whatever you can use. Just make sure that when you think in an organized manner. And the shaitan is very deceptive. He will bring 2 or 3 ideas in your head, and he will spin them around so much that you'll be thinking that you have a lot to deal with, a lot to think about, until you end up saying, "Oh, this is a matter that is too big. I don't have the time to think about it right now." If you actually take a pen and paper and take this storm of ideas in your head and take one and put it in a paper, and then go back, take the second one and put it in a paper, take the third one, you put it in a paper, you'll find nothing is left. All this storm was 3 ideas. And then once you have them written in front of you, you realize that, subhanAllah, the first one is not really relevant anymore. It was relevant a month ago, but now circumstances have changed. Now it's not relevant. Number 2, I can delegate it to so-and-so. Number 3, I can just buy it, or I can, you'll realize you'll be able to find solutions easier when you are able to see them written in front of you. So the ulama also said that this is part of the meanings of the verse of Surah Al-Rahman, Surah Al-Alaq, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ, the one who taught with the pen. One of the benefits of the pen is the organization of thoughts. Why do people write publications, books? Why do they author? Because they organize their thoughts, and then we are interested to read thoughts that are organized. Look at what we're doing now. We're reading the books of Ibnul Qayyim. That's an authored book, compiled book, organized book. Thoughts that are systematically organized. So this is something that we learn through what? Through the pen. So just like how you would use the pen to help others, you can also use the pen to help yourself. First, organize your own thoughts. So now he moves on to what are the most beneficial of all thoughts. He says definitely, أعلى الفكر وأجلها وأنفعها ما كان لله والدار الآخرة. The most beneficial of thoughts are those thoughts. We are moving to something really important, so I'm going to list a few things here that you need to focus on. He says the most beneficial thoughts undoubtedly are the thoughts relating to the akhirah. Because if you think about dunya, how long are you going to be in dunya? Very short amount of time. You cannot be thinking too much about dunya. Think about dunya only relevant to how long you stay in it, and think about the akhirah relevant to how long you're going to stay in it. So he says the most beneficial ideas undoubtedly are the ideas relating to al-akhirah. But if we were to write them down, what are these ideas? He says these are also can be looked at in categories. Look at even those ideas. You will want to focus on the most beneficial ones on top and give them most of your time. Again, also beneficial ideas. You can have 2 ideas. You'll be thinking, which one do I give favor? What should I focus on, this or should I focus on that? If you know their order of priority, if you know the level of benefit you get from each one of them, you will be able to organize them in the right level of priority, and then you will tackle them in that order. Ibnul Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, nothing is more beneficial to you than reflecting on the Quran. Nothing can be more beneficial to you than the Quran. He says, the first idea, al-fikratu fi ayatihi al-munazzala wa ta'aqqulha, to think about the Quran and try to develop deep understanding of the verses. Let it shape your brain, let it shape your mindset, let it shape your priorities, let it shape your understanding. Like I was saying earlier, your aql, your wisdom, is what will make you decide what is more important than the other. And what's the most effective thing for this purpose? Quran. Spend time thinking, learning, developing your understanding about the Quran. That will be the one thing that you spend most of your mental energy and most of your time. وَلِذَلِكَ أَنزَلَهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. This is why Allah revealed the Quran, not just to recite it, بَلِ التِّلَاوَةُ وَسِيلَةٌ. He says, not to recite the Quran. The recitation of the Quran is actually a means to reflecting in the Quran. The recitation of the Quran is the means. You only recite, you memorize for the purpose of allowing those words to trigger ideas, reflection ideas in your mind. However, what we have done in today's world, we've taken the recitation of the Quran as if it was the goal itself. So even this is the best of us. And there are those who are not thinking about the Quran and they're not even reciting the Quran. The best of us, إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي, are those who recite the Quran, but not realizing that the recitation of the Quran is the means, not the end. قال بعض السلف, Ibn Qayyim رحمه الله, he said, some of the Sahaba said, أنزل القرآن ليعمل به فاتخذوا تلاوته عملا. The Quran was brought down for people to act upon it. However, people took its recitation as the action. Right? So if you ask yourself, what is the one thing that you need to spend the most time in? You'll find it's what? Al-Quran. Al-Quran has to take a significant amount of your reflection, a significant amount of your time, and a significant amount of your mental energy. Number two, he says, الفكرة في آياته المشهودة والاعتبار بها. To reflect on the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the created signs. So there are the revealed written signs of the Quran, and you also have the created signs in the existence around you. The creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will teach you who Allah is. When you look around, you will learn from it who Allah subhanahu wa is, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. His names and attribute will have another reality, another dimension to it, your understanding of it. The purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ihsan, the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His generosity, His grace, His nobility, all of that, you will see it in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some time has to be spent in reflecting in Allah's creation. All the creations around you, creations in the heavens, the stars, the moon, the shams, the sun, the rivers, the trees, the birds, the animals, the insects, everything around us in which we can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's actions. Because He's the creator of all of that. And He created this massive creation for us to see it as a sign that indicates to who Allah Azza wa Jal is. Imam al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, in his tafsir of Surah Al-Rahman, Imam al-Razi, in his tafsir of Surah Al-Rahman, he says, when you look at Surah Al-Rahman, you'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He is Ar-Rahman, He is the most merciful. Ar-Rahman. What is the most merciful act that He did to humans? He said after that immediately, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran. He taught the Quran. The most act of mercy and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to teach people Quran. Everything else comes under that. Even though after that He says, خلق الإنسان. خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. He taught man and he made him articulate to be able to address his ideas, articulate his ideas, and also understand ideas that are articulated to him. After that, He said what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says, الشمس والقمر بحسبان. The movement of the sun, the movement of the moon are based on precise measurements of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, if you can't understand the Quran, at least understand Allah, who Allah Azza wa Jalla is, from His creation. So he says, after He says علم القرآن, He says الشمس والقمر بحسبان. Then He says والنجم والشجر يسجدان. النجم. What's النجم? النجم means one of two things: either the star that we see in the skies, or the grass. The grass, or little plants that has no trunk. So they said النجم is the little plants that have no trunk. They are very, very weak and they bend down quickly because of the lack of trunk. And the trees who have trunks. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala combined two kind of opposite, الشمس والقمر, the sun and the moon, in one verse. And in the following verse He says والنجم والشجر, plants that are trunkless and the trees that are trunked. Right? He says he put these together. He says والنجم والشجر يسجدان. He says when you look at the star, you look at the tree, the way it's created is a lot of the times it's in the shape of somebody bowing down. When you look at trees, they are a lot of the times in a shape of somebody bowing down. And when you look at the grasses, you know, the little grasses that are trunkless, you'll find them bending down as if it's prostrated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. More so when the sun, when you see that the light of the sun has hit them after Asr, you'll see them as if they have like a longer shade in the sujood. So he says rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says فيه إشارة إلى أن بعض الناس إن لم تكن له النفس الزكية التي يغنيها الله بالدلائل التي في القرآن فله في الآفاق آيات منها الشمس والقمر والنجم والشجر. He said there are people who are superior in their intelligence, who are able to suffice themselves from the signs of the Quran, the verse of the Quran. And those whose souls are not as pure, they need to look at the physical signs. So first, the Quran, that would suffice. But not every soul has the purity to benefit from the Quran like that. For those people, Allah created the physical things for people to benefit. So that's why he said the first thing we need to look at, Ibn al-Qayyim, going back to Ibn al-Qayyim, the first thing is the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, the verse of the Quran. Second to that is to look at the signs of Allah around us in His creation, reflecting on that. These are beneficial thoughts. It will really change you and benefit you. Number 3, he says, to reflect on Allah's mercies and blessings, the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spend some time thinking and appreciating Allah's kindness over us. You know, simple things like your ability to breathe. Spend some time to think about that. And what would happen? What happens to people who have difficulty breathing? You see their lives, subhanAllah. They have extremely difficult life. Right? Think of the fact that you can simply eat something, all right? And then you can forget about it. And what happens to it after you swallowed it until it leaves you from the back passage? You have no control over it. It's just everything handles itself within you. Look at the blessing of Allah. Imagine if you have to consciously move things from the stomach into the liver, into the intestine, into the colon, into this, into that, and you have to control the spread of enzymes and the chemicals of the digestive chemicals. Imagine if you have to do this consciously. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala automated this movement for you. Imagine breathing. If you have to breathe consciously, you breathe unconsciously. You don't have to focus on breathing. Imagine what happens if you get tired and you need to sleep. Who's going to do the breathing for you then? You know, Allah, these are blessings. The more you think about them, the more you benefit. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, when he goes to answer the call of nature in the bathroom, he will come out thinking, wallahi, he will say, this is a ni'mah that only the people of reflection will think about it. The fact that having eaten everything and your body is ready to excrete and let go of the defecation, your body will just naturally let it out. This is a big ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that you can just let the fluids out of your body in the form of urine, you know, and you have no problem letting that out, subhanallah. How often do we think about this? Right? Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, people have to think like this. Right? And if they don't think like this, then anything will disturb their peace. In today's world, they talk about the magnetic field that surrounds the earth, the atmosphere. Do you know, due to the movement of the earth and due to this magnetic field around us, this magnetic field is holding the oxygen on the surface of this earth. Meaning, had it not been for this magnetic field, you know what happened to oxygen? It will disperse into space. You know what is holding our oxygen? We have oxygen that we need to breathe. It doesn't leave us. It doesn't go into space. Why? Because of this magnetic field. And we never think about this. We take breathing for granted. Right? So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, one has to spend some time thinking about Allah's blessings on them. A lot of people are miserable because they miss on something minor and they don't know what they actually have. If they thought of what they have, their life will be much more different. their mental state will be much more different, their emotional state will be much more different, and their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be a lot more different. Okay? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, having listed these three, he says, هذه الأنواع الثلاثة تستخرج من القلب معرفة الله ومحبته وخوفه ورجاؤه. These three things, if you focus on them, what are they? The Quran, the signs of Allah in His creation, and Allah's gifts and blessings. He says, if you focus on these three, it will create within you the love of Allah, the fear of Allah, and the hope in Allah's mercy, al-raja. They will create that within you. And that, if you have that, that's khalas, your worship is sorted. If you love Allah, if you fear Allah, and if you hope in Allah's mercy, then you are sorted. These things, they create those emotions within your heart. ودوام الفكرة في ذلك مع الذكر يصبغ القلب في المعرفة والمحبة صبغة تامة. Basically, if you continuously reflect like this, and also remember Allah by moving your tongue with that, it will actually change the chemistry of your heart, if you like. It will change the nature of your heart. You will become like a different person altogether. Number 4 of the things you should focus on when you want to think about matters relating to your akhirah, he says, الرابع الفكرة في عيوب النفس وآفاتها وفي عيوب العمل. To spend some time in this order as number 4, thinking about your deficiencies, your shortcomings, your weaknesses, right? And also to think about your amal, your deeds, your whatever you are offering for the akhirah. Think about that and look at how much deficiencies there are there. Right? The Salaf, they used to say, if we think about our quality, about our deeds and the quality of them, we will understand that we have nothing that we can rely on for the akhirah. And that's why they used to celebrate calamities, because they think that the reward they get for calamities is the best they can get for righteous deeds. But the actual salat and sawm and hajj and all these kind of things, they feel there's a lot of deficiencies there that makes them unreliable. So sometimes you have this false sense of peace, thinking that you have a lot to count on, a lot to rely on, right? And that will move you into laziness and lethargy, you know. So he says one of the beneficial things to you is to understand that there are always deficiencies, there are shortcomings, there are weaknesses in you as a person, and also in you, whatever you produce as righteous deeds. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, هذه الفكرة عظيمة النفع وهذا باب لكل خير. This is a very beneficial thought, and it's a gate through which you can bring so much goodness into your life. He says, وتأثيرها في كسر النفس الأمارة بالسوء. And the benefits of this, it will break your arrogance, that the nafs within you that incites you to evil, it will break that nafs. It will break that arrogance and pride within you, which will make you struggle with less things. He says, رحمه الله تعالى, ومتى كسرت النفس الأمارة بالسوء. There's this nafs that incites you towards evil, right? If you manage to break it through reminding it of its deficiencies and reminding it of the shortcomings of its deeds, it will calm down and you will have a lot less to deal with. He says, رحمه الله تعالى, متى كسرت النفس الأمارة بالسوء عاشت النفس المطمئنة. You have like 2 types of nafs within you, or 2 dimensions of your nafs. النفس الأمارة بالسوء, your nafs that incites you to do evil, and the nafs that is content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you manage to break the one that incites you towards evil, the one that is content with Allah will rise and take over. He says, this thought, the thought thinking about your deficiencies, your weaknesses, and your shortcomings is very beneficial, because it's gonna tame your soul, the soul that incites you towards evil. And then your nafs al-mutma'inna, and nafs that is inclined towards righteousness, it will take over and it will begin to rule the scene. Right? and the heart will revive. Your heart will be revived. يحيى القلب, because the nafs controls the heart. Once the nafs al-amara bis-su is weakened, it will no longer take over the heart, and the heart will be managed by the tranquil soul, the tranquil side of you that's content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then your heart will regain its life, will begin to think about the akhirah, will begin to think about doing this and doing that, and working for this and working for that, having good intention, having that, you know. فحي القلب ودارت كلمته في مملكته وبث أمراءه وجنوده بمصالحه. This heart that is the king, it will resume its role, and it will begin to rule its soldiers and its workers. طيب, that's number 4. If you're not thinking about these 4 things, what else should you be thinking about? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, you should be thinking about how efficiently are you benefiting from your time. So you need to be thinking about how efficiently are you benefiting from your time and how you can enhance this. He says, الفكرة في واجب الوقت. طيب, what is necessary to do for the time, and what are the duties that are associated with time? Are you failing yourself when it comes to managing your time? Are you being efficient, non-efficient, and so on and so forth? الفكرة في واجب الوقت ووظيفته وجمع الهم كله عليه. جمع الهم كله عليه. To focus your mind in realizing the importance of time. They said, العارف ابن وقته. A person who really knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will focus on this time. فإن أضاعه ضاعت عليه مصالحه كلها. If you waste your time, where will you do the action? Thoughts are not beneficial unless you are able to action them. If you're not benefiting from your time, maximizing your benefit of the time, then the whole thinking process becomes fruitless. Okay? فجميع المصالح إنما تنشأ من الوقت. He says all benefits come from the availability of time. You can have millions of thoughts. They will be completely fruitless if you don't have the time to execute them. So the ulama, they said, for any idea that you may have, any project that you may have, you need 2 things. Right? You need time and you need energy. The time, everybody knows it. Right? And therefore, don't waste time. Energy, you need to realize that the earlier part of the day, that's when you have energy. As the day progresses, you have less energy. So the times that are in the morning are more beneficial, you know, and more usable and more fruitful when it comes to executing ideas and projects. The shaitan will want you to reverse things, you know, try to do work in the evening and waste the time in the morning, or waste time altogether. So anything that you do, you need to understand it needs 2 things, energy and time. So you need to be thinking, are you squandering time? Energy, are you benefiting from your energy in the most productive way, or you are spending a lot of energy and benefiting little? Is there any way that you can produce the same with less energy? Okay? Your thoughts have to be revolving around this. And energy and time, they go together. The beginning of the day, that's a time you have higher levels of energy. So what should be spent then? What should you be doing in the early part of the morning? What should be done in the afternoon? What should be done after you eat the meal? What should be done before you eat a meal? What should be done before you sleep? What should be done after you wake up, and so on and so forth. So you have to be mindful of these 2 things. So you have to account yourself about the management of time. Always think about ideas on how to enhance time. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, he was quoted to have said, صحبت الصوفية فلم أستفد منهم سوى حرفين. I accompanied Sufis of his time. Sufis are the people who, in his time, people who used to work on spirituality, developing themselves, getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having this connection with Allah. Right? The early Sufis who did not, before they got into this old bid'ah and all these innovations. He says, صحبت الصوفية. I accompanied them. فلم أستفد منهم سوى حرفين. I benefited 2 things from them. 2 words. أحدهما قولهم الوقت سيف. One of them is time is a sword. طيب? It's very sharp. It will not tolerate any nonsense. It will cut you. It will leave you and go. طيب? فإن قطعته وإلا قطعك. If you benefit from it, otherwise it will leave you. And then he says, الثانية نفسك إن لم تشغلها بالحق وإلا شغلتك بالباطل. If you don't occupy your nafs with good, your nafs will occupy you with evil. He says these two things, I remember them from the Sufis. Meaning they are the most beneficial lessons he learned from them. Watch how you spend your time, and also be mindful. If you don't occupy your mind, your nafs, with beneficial activities, your nafs will drag you into non-beneficial activities. طيب, how do you think? Yeah. Yeah, طيب. Okay, we can stop here, inshallah. The section is not finished, but we can continue from here next week with Allah. I hope, inshallah, you can take these thoughts and these ideas and make sure that you realize the importance of thoughts. You know, your reality is only the product of the thoughts you had yesterday. Right? And tomorrow will only become a reality of the thoughts you have today. So you really need to think about what you're thinking about. طيب. بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خير. We'll stop here and we continue next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.